All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the legendary banner impressions for Roy. Okay, so I can tell you right away that the first thing I won't be doing during this analysis of the new legendary banner is I definitely won't be taking 2 steps back from my approach to giving you an honest perspective on Roy. Okay, so of course what I mean by that is we're going to take a look at what his fodder or what he could bring to the AR meta, his skills, himself. We don't really know his stats. I will probably do a unit comparison analysis for Roy himself because I feel like he's gonna be comparable. I will not be talking about the new blessing that he provides because I have no idea what it is. And honestly, by the time you even watch this video, there's a good chance that we already know what it is. So rather than speculate, we're just gonna wait until he's actually out. And then I'm going to analyze whether that new blessing effect has any actual implications. Okay, so yeah, let's take a look at what we got and jump into it. New legendary hero joins the battle. Cool.
Let us bring forth a new era together.
Okay, Blazing Lion. So if anyone's actually played any game that Roy is a part of, including Fire Emblem Heroes, you'll know well enough that you should just use Marth. Okay, that was just a funny. Please don't come after me, Roy haters. Seriously though, Roy is a red sword infantry, so I can tell you right away, and this is totally objective, I'm not trying to create any bias here, he's in a very bloated movement and weapon type. And as I say with always these red sword infantries, red physical damage, you have already hundreds of options. It literally must be about 100 red sword infantries by now. You have so many choices to make. So Roy is in a bloated area, and what he's going to bring to the table is whatever preference skill he has, which we'll take a look at in a moment, or his new blessing, which we have no idea what it is yet. It was supposed to be speed, but it's not, so I don't know what he's doing here, but maybe this is their way of making him more appealing, because already I can tell you as a unit movement weapon type that he is not going to be that appealing.
Let us bring forth a new era together.
All right, so here we have it. I actually figured his weapon would likely be this. It makes sense. And if you played his game, then he had a distant counter weapon. So he has a distant counter weapon. It's an odd name. I was expecting like Binding Blade or something like that, but whatever, like a more refined Binding Blade. I guess it is because it's called Dragon Bind, so maybe it is. Either way, effective against dragons, makes sense, distant counter. So it's like a better distant counter weapon. It's like the best sword distant counter we have. Sorry Ryoma, sorry Ike. You guys got power creeped by effectiveness against dragons, which is actually fairly useful, to be fair. He does have Dragon Fang, which makes absolutely no sense with the fact that his C skill implies he doesn't like dragons and beasts, but we'll talk about that in a moment. This is probably a reference to maybe Ninian being his mom. Who knows? So they kind of throw these hints in here and there. That's what I see. Either way, renewal. So I guess this is kind of like I don't really understand, but maybe it has something to do with his weapon, or maybe it's a way to say, hey, look at me, I can be using a falchion too. Maybe that's what renewals are doing there. Either way, those that take a look at those, we're going to talk about bonus doubler first. So bonus doubler is pretty much Erica and legendary Marth's weapon on a skill, and of course Caden giving his stats to somebody else. That's pretty much what bonus doubler is. To kind of summarize what that is, it's pretty much whatever sort of stats that he has, he's going to double up on them. That's pretty straightforward, I assume. It doesn't really require any friends, so that's kind of what's different from this, and of course, maybe another unit near him. It does have one glaring weakness that I'd like to point out right away from the skill, which is susceptible to panics, whether that's Panic Ploy, Versa, or something sleeper like the Panic Weapons from Year 1 Halloween and the Panic Staff, which again, I want to mention these could be a thing if characters like Caden, Erica and this skill become more prominent in the meta. So there are counters to this, and that definitely should be recognized. Now, the actual implications of bonus doubler itself are not as appealing as you might think on a first impression, and that's because it is on the A skill. And the A skill is so important, especially if you consider what bonus doubler is supposed to compete with. So bonus doubler is something you give to like somebody to mega tank, right? You're thinking Erica, Legendary Marth, bonus doubler, boom, Caden beside me, and then you just have like so much stats. But the thing is, to use it, you have to give up distant counter. So your tank has a big problem because he's not going to be able to retaliate from a lot of units. Yeah, he'll probably tank it, or she will probably tank it, but not being able to counterattack is a huge weakness of this skill because it competes with distant counter or close counter in the case of other units. And we don't really know whether this is infantry locked or not, but I'm just going to assume that anyone can use it. And therefore, it's a big problem because if your tanks like tank hits but don't kill back or don't even retaliate, those units, especially in something like Ether Raids, are likely to get danced, and those units that attacked into your tank can then, especially with the Legendary Azura, have 3 movement, swing around, and pick off your weaker units. And that's the biggest problem I see with bonus doubler. While it is very powerful, especially in the right setups, taking away the advantage of those counter skills is very important. And that's where it does shine. The particular units that want to use this sort of skill are, of course, units that have distant counter on their weapon. So obviously Roy himself is going to use it pretty well, I hope. Depends on his stat spread, really. Although I will assume he's going to be pretty good. And then your distant counter users, who I just made fun of recently. But yeah, Ryoma, Ike, Legendary Ike, Fjorm, Dorcas, and assuming we could give this to armors, there'd be like Harden as well, Legendary Tiki. Those are all things that also could be an option. And finally, the dragons themselves, all of them with Lightning Breath. So all of those are good candidates for this skill because they don't take away their ability to use this sort of thing. They can just get stats up and not have those problems. I do want to mention though, especially with dragons, because you might think this is really good on dragons, bonus doubler doesn't take away your dragon weakness, so you're still going to suffer against the traditional dragon counters, which of course, Air with Mystic Boost, Lithia-Berg, which denies your doubles, and those good old dragon slaying weapons. I'm talking about Deirdre's, Julia's, Buckets, whatever it might be, those still present a problem. So even if you stat stack up to like 70, 80 defense, those units can still kick your butt. Not to mention, somebody like Deirdre, who uses Divine Naga, completely shuts down this skill anyways, because you don't get any benefit of those stats because she shuts them down anyways. So it's already not so appealing when you think about the actual implications of it. It's a really good skill when you don't run into its problems. So with that being said, let's talk about the final skill, which is Human Virtue. And this is his preference skill, but honestly, I kind of like it. I think most people kind of ignore this because they were probably looking at bonus doubler, but I really like Human Virtue because it's a supportive skill. And I'm a big fan of supportive skills, and it's unique enough that it matters. So being able to do like a hone to, especially infantry, by the way, is difficult of like an emblem type of buff. I'm talking like hone flyers, hone cavalry, hone armor, and such. Infantry in particular had some problems maximizing buffs because they took too many skills. It took like defense tactic, attack tactics, and then you need to use like 4 different tactics to maximize buffs, whereas a hone cav and a fort cav were 2 skills. 4 skill slots versus 2 skill slots. It's just a matter of using that in the way. And of course, Human Virtue affects himself, so that's also a nice benefit here because Roy will have some synergy with bonus doubler as a result of that. And of course, he has a distant counter. So his kit is really synergistic, works for him. He's probably going to be a decent unit, but like I said, because he's already competing with so many people in Red Sword Infantry, if you don't already have a built Red Sword Infantry, I don't really see Roy being all that amazing. And with the counters I mentioned earlier, it's not much out of it. But his Human Virtue makes him a very, very interesting support unit that I definitely think can put him in a lot of teams, especially if his Blessing also has some good implications. So let's move on. Whew, nice explosion.
I will never back down.
Gunthra, Ephraim, Grima, Dancing Xander, Dancing Micaiah, Halloween Niles. Okay, I have to do this. Halloween Niles is sharing with Adrift Male Corin. And they're both blue. They're literally side by side. That couldn't be more fitting. Also, female Corins here, but regardless of that. And there's Surtur and Hrid. Okay, so let's go over the actual legendary banner itself. If you took a look at my predictions from about a week ago, about 10 days ago, I nailed about 9 to 10 out of 12 of these. Of course, I wasn't confident in my blue predictions, so of course blue ended up being the oddball. I'm also a little bit shocked that there were 3 Adrift units on this banner. It's a little bit weird, but maybe it'll just spell something interesting for the banners to come. Those are the only things that are oddballs here, but generally speaking, this banner is very good in particular things. So what I mean that is like for fodder especially, you can get some really good value from red and colorless specifically. Red holding distant counter off of Hrid, Roy himself having that new bonus doubler skill, which definitely can be used on a lot of units. And unfortunately, Dancing Micaiah doesn't really offer much in fodder, but she's a very, very good AR meta unit. And that's because of the Vantage, anti-Vantage weapon. So on air defense, it's very good. You have your anti-cavalry and anti-armors, which, yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, if you use her as a dancer, she can have some usage against characters like Duma or Surtur if those give you problems. And on defense, when you are getting swept by Vantage, she is able to clean up if the enemy doesn't snipe her. So, good meta unit. And if you don't already have her, that makes red really good value for you because of distant counter and bonus doubler. Yeah, and legendary heroes are always good units to pick up. So, generally speaking, I think red is very solid if you don't already have Micaiah. But the problem is if you already have her, that's where the value tends to decrease. On the other hand, we have colorless. So colorless is really good as well for almost the same reasons as red. And that's because close counter fodder is there and the actual dagger that Xander has. So if units like Beast Cavalry become more prominent, his dagger is actually very good and can be inherited, close counter and the dagger all in one kind of like inherit. I mean, you can inherit more stuff. You could actually inherit QR3, the dagger and close counter come March because of the 4 inherit skill option. But yeah, that's one thing that's very good out of Xander. He's like premium fodder there. Ev Grima is also a very, very strong unit. Colorless, as you guys should know by now, colorless units poses no real weaknesses, while F Grima has suffered a little bit due to dragon counters becoming more prominent, including our boy Roy over there. She generally can be stat stacked enough for it to matter, and if you actually replace Dragon Skin and give her IO Shield instead, and use something like Bonus Doubler with stat stacking, she does have a distant counter weapon, or could you opt for Lightning Breath, and end up being one of the better users of Bonus Doubler, of course, assuming Flyers can use it. This is the big if. With that being said, the last one being Makoto is generally not too great for fodder because Brazen Attack Res isn't so desirable, but Flash is a decent staff that hasn't seen so much usage, and I'm just going to say that's because of the actual rarity of that staff. That staff could be really good on AR defense if you're like, if you can set up your team in a way that they can follow up and abuse it, especially when you have some sort of tanks like tanking you and they don't have null C disrupt. It's a big if, and generally it is countered by null C disrupt, and that's why it's not so great, and generally why colorless is a little bit weaker than red when it comes to fodder. And that's what I'd say. I mean, red and colorless, very good options here, and if especially got to consider your own needs here. Like if you're playing for AR, you know, there's nothing really here besides red giving you a bit of value with distant counter and possibly Dancing Micaiah. And then if cavalry gives you problems in like colorless is good. That's pretty much it for those two being the top. Now, green and blue, generally speaking, I would avoid. And that's because they don't really offer too much in terms of fodder. You have a guard bow, attack speed link, attack defense bond, null follow-ups. Going through an Ephraim don't really provide any valuable fodder. Surtur has steady stance 4, but honestly, if you're looking for that, I'd probably wait until he's on a actual focus banner instead with skills. And so, yeah, that's not much. You have attack speed bond and a plus rally when it comes to female corn. And that sort of rally, especially, I do want to keep repeating that I feel that its availability will happen eventually through something like GHBs and Tempest Trials. It's only a matter of time. So I feel like that wouldn't be a good reason to be summoning for those things in particular. If you haven't finished merges on Gunthra and Ephraim, for instance, then sure, you could probably get something out of blue. But generally speaking, none of that is super desirable. Null follow-up is a very niche skill, and I don't really feel like it's worth pulling for. And if it really was, you'd wait not to pull on a legendary banner where you don't get your full value. So summarizing, red, colorless, depends on you, and probably avoid blue and green completely. Let's take a look at the math, and I'll tell you exactly why you shouldn't be sniping particular units, like Roy, for instance, especially not Roy, and the fodder itself. So, we have the good old mathematics that I always love to take a look at to remind you guys every single time that you shouldn't jump into these legendary banners fully prepared, especially with something like the Find and Vote banner that just passed, which may be more appealing to you. So if you look at this, red is a disaster. Even though it has some really good fodder, it is a disaster. It requires the most amount of orbs for the 5-star focus units because it is the most saturated pool. There's a lot of red units in it. And this particular banner has 12 focus units. So when you divide those chances among them, it ends up being a very low chance to be pulling red focuses. So if you don't walk into this with like 400 red orbs, then you're going to be in a bit of trouble because you realize that that's about how much you need to 1 in 10 people take that amount of orbs to pull Roy. Now, the beauty of legendary banners is as long as you're complacent with getting anything from a particular color, you get your value. So for instance, if you're okay with Rid, Dancing Micaiah, or Roy, you can expect to see one of those every like 69 orbs. And that's not bad. Every like 3-4 circles, you should end up, well, more than that. Yeah, about 3 to 4 circles of pulling, you should see Roy, Rid, or Dancing Micaiah. So as long as you're complacent with what the color provides, that's how I encourage you to get your value out of legendary banners. With that being said, don't forget about the March update, which will give us 4 inheritable skills. We don't really know what's coming as well. And of course, the legendary banner may be a lot better, especially if you're considering rising in ranks. AR, especially with an Astro Mythic possibly coming up, and air merges also mattering if you're climbing ranks. So maybe it's better to just skip, save your orbs. And if you're looking for something like Distant Counter specifically, you may just want to wait until a 2 or 3 person banner shows up with that. So yeah, that pretty much summarizes all my thoughts. You guys can look forward to a Roy comparison video. I will probably cover that in a few days. And yeah, that pretty much does it for me. Thank you so much for watching. As always, give the video a thumbs up. Please let me know in the comments below what you think of our boy Roy. I'm sure there's a lot of fans. I love Roy too, by the way. I play him in Smash. I like Roy more than Marth when it comes to that. So please don't attack me when I say that I'm hating on Roy. I'm really not. I love the boy. I just think that I have to give you guys an objective look at it. Thank you so much. Talk to you guys later. Discord, comments. See you then. Subscribe. Peace.